Hi, welcome to This Adoptee Life. I'm Amanda, and I'm really happy that you're here. I started This Adoptee Life a little over 2 years ago as a blog to share my own story as an adoptee and to invite fellow adoptees to share their story in their own words. I also host meetings online for adoptees where we come together and chat and connect and find support and validation in one another and in the understanding that we can provide to one another as fellow adoptees. If you already know a little bit about me, if you have followed the blog, or if you've followed me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter already and know a little bit about my story, I'm so happy that you're here. And if you don't know me, if you don't know anything about my story, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to who I am, what This Adoptee Life is about, how it came to be, and where I hope to take it from here. So I was born in Colombia, probably in 1984. I don't know exactly. I was taken to, my papers say that in October of 1984, I was brought to the police in Medellin, a city in Colombia, by an unknown woman. She claims to have had me for a month and was unable to find my mother, and so she brought me to the police and handed me over there. From the police, I went to a transit home of sorts, and there are mentionings of a foster family. But before that, my photograph was published in a local newspaper with a caption that read something along the lines of, this is an unknown baby, name unknown, parents are known, and if somebody recognizes her, they can come and claim her. And there was an address, and nobody came. And with that, I was labeled abandoned. A few months after that, so now we're in about February of 1985. So since they didn't know my birth date, since they didn't have a name, no dates, nothing, I was just an unknown baby with no name, no information. They had me examined by doctors who determined that estimated that I looked to be about somewhere between 6 and 8 months old. And I was given the birth date of July 1st. And from there, I think I went to a foster home, and there's about a 7 or 8 month gap in the paperwork. And then I was matched for adoption to a couple from Sweden. So in December of 1985, now I'm about a year and a half old, according to the birth date I was given, I was adopted. And with some signatures on a piece of paper or a view, I was no longer Colombian, but Swedish. And my adopted parents' names went into the public registry in Colombia as my parents. And I was brought to Sweden. I grew up in Sweden. And while I was growing up, I would have told pretty much the same story that many adoptees do, which is, oh, I'm totally fine. I have no interest in searching for any family. I feel as Swedish as anybody. I even had a very typical Swedish last name, which I made several jokes about. On the outside, I probably looked very well adapted. You could have never guessed or thought that there was anything that bothered me about adoption or my experience as an adoptee. And at the time, I don't think that I was able to connect any of my conflicting feelings that I did have to my being having been adopted. And I also didn't understand or know about what had come before, the trauma of having been separated from my mother, from my family, from everything and anything that was familiar to me when I was little. And so I grew up being totally fine. I would call myself on numerous occasions, and kind of like a standard phrase, I would juxtaposition my experience to that of my brother, who was also adopted from Colombia and who did exhibit a little bit more of um, maybe his experience having had more of an impact on him than I did. And so I would call myself, oh, well, you could call me a success story of adoption. And what I meant by that was that I didn't think it had affected me at all. And then years went by. I got married. I had a daughter. And then I had another daughter. And little by little, it started to sort of creep into my mind that, I wasn't able to provide their medical history when we went to the pediatrician. All of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was able to meet a biological, genetically, DNA connected relative of mine, my daughter's. I had never had that before. And then one day, after sort of a few different interactions with different situations, I did decide to go on Facebook and look up if there was a group for adoptees from Colombia, or as I would have said then, people who were adopted from Colombia. And I found one, and it had 1,500 members. And that alone shocked me. I was absolutely flabbergasted, and I was thinking to myself, like, 1,500 people like me adopted from Colombia. I thought that was a huge number. And then I started looking in this group and reading the posts, and they were talking about trauma. They were talking about separation from our mothers, from our home country. They were calling themselves Colombian with pride, something that I had never felt fully comfortable claiming to be Colombian. It always felt a little bit safer to say that I was Swedish. And then, so a lot of these conversations took me, I was really taken aback by them because it was all new to me. All the way people were talking about adoption with corruption and as an industry, and some even going as far as to say that it's trafficking. And at first glance, I was very reluctant to accept what I was reading and hearing. It didn't make sense to me at first. And then I started doing research. I started reading. I started really listening to these stories, and specifically the ones who had reunited through DNA tests with their family in Colombia and had found out that they were not willingly relinquished. They were kidnapped from their mothers. Their mothers were lied to in the hospital, and just a number of different steps that had been taken to make these adoptions possible, and essentially these children were made available for adoption. And I started going back to my own paperwork and started questioning the story that I was given. And little by little, this is where I started coming out of the fog. And that's when I started the blog. And I share about reading my adoption papers for the first time. I share about the different steps of coming out of the fog, the anger, the sadness, the grieving, and all of that is on my blog. And I'll be sharing more of that here with you as well. And so in this process is where I, like I said, started the blog. And then I quickly realized that there are so many other adoptees out there like me who have stories to share and have stories to tell. And as I was sharing my story, I started feeling empowered in owning my story and telling it my way. And I wanted to offer that same opportunity to fellow adoptees of mine. And so that's why I have people who want to share their story and don't know how to, don't know where to. Well, you're invited to do it on This Adoptee Life blog. And then here's the next step with the YouTube videos. And I'm very, very excited to share with you here as well. A little more in person, a little more personal. And I'm very nervous, but I'm very, very excited. So with all of that being said, I hope that you will have a look at Instagram, find me there, follow me, find me on Facebook, and follow me. I am This Adoptee Life across the board, also on Twitter, and I would love to hear from fellow adoptees. I work really hard to provide a safe space for adoptees to come and speak their truth and get validation, support, backup by other fellow adoptees and by me. And with all of that being said, before I make this too long, I would like to thank you for being here. I'd like to thank you for listening to me. Thank you for supporting me. And I really look forward to this new adventure with you guys. And the way I end all my posts and all my videos, to all my fellow adoptees, P.S. We are all in this together. Bye.